Good morning, everybody. It's really exciting and wonderful to see so many of you defying the weather and joining us on this conversation. Actually, it's an honor, it's a privilege, it's also an obligation that I feel towards all of you. And it feels a little bit like football coaches, you know, to talk about innovation. It's a thing that a lot of people can relate to. It's a thing that many people have, you know, deep experience with, and even more people have opinion about it. So I would like to add a little something based on the journey that 42 of our colleagues around the globe have contributed to, and that is special focus on the how to deal basically with the highly creative ideas at different levels. Today, I will narrow it down to the, to the capacity of a leader and a couple of points that that I would like to emphasize by doing so. But let me actually start with a little story.
Once upon a time, in a land not so far away from ours, there was a troll. The ugliest troll you have ever seen. All the company's employees and leaders feared it. It had the power to enchant people with sweet words about creativity, play, and out-of-the-box thinking. And when the charm kicked in, he demanded discipline, results, and return on ideas invested. His name was the innovation paradox.
Yeah, so and it's no joke, right? This is this is what practice shows. This is what research is, bumping our heads against. How is it that we can deal with the process that encompasses, by definition, so different demands? So what works in terms of coming up with all these bright, brilliant, novel, out-of-the-box ideas might be actually the opposite what it's required to get it done, right? And it's different levels of complexity. So what we would like to start from is the innovation paradox, and where I would like us to come a little closer to is how to deal with this innovation paradox as leaders. Just to illustrate another example of how difficult this troll might be, there's a story that some of you might recognize. It's a story of Lego in early 2000s, and actually you might know that Lego was on the verge of becoming bankrupt, right? So it was really, really serious. And when they it all started actually with the, in a way, decline of sales, and the natural reaction to this decline of sales was that they need to create more of the toys and products. So they ended up with almost 13,000 different elements. An element is a combination of the color and the shape, right? And all of these elements, naturally, they encompass a certain amount of fixed costs, right? So you need to have molds and so on. So this excessive creativity that I can basically demonstrate with the fact that they had a cook figure that had 7 different facial expressions, right? This creativity was part of the bigger issue that Lego was experiencing. So it combined with a couple of other difficulties, but it got them so far that in 2003 they were, really difficult shoes. And I really recommend to read the story of Robertson and his book about Lego, because it has many different solutions on how did they go about it, how did they basically streamline their R&D process, how did they involve users at the very early stages of testing ideas, right? How did they decide to deal with the non-invented here syndrome and actually trust that their suppliers and merchandisers and so on, that they will operate in the best interest of Lego. So there were a couple of very difficult topics to deal with, and they made it, and that's what makes it as a very interesting story of how a company has dealt with the innovation paradox. That was one of the triggers that led us, and by us I mean my colleagues here at BI in Ljubljana, to study a little bit the innovation paradox and to study the things that we might do in order to deal with it. So this is a little earlier study in the Leadership Quarterly, where we were collecting data in the field, and we were also conducting experiments where we wanted to see how much of and what kind of innovations do translate into implemented innovations. And over again, actually, we found what you can see in the yellow marked curve, that there's at certain point in time, after certain inflection point, there is a basically diminishing return. Meaning, if ideas are too novel, they meet resistance, they counter what we already know as familiar and what we think is working, they become impossible because they would require too many resources, right? So all these obstacles in heads and in organizations around an idea. So that is also actually conflicting a little bit the idea of fluency, the more the merrier, it is a mainstream idea in the creativity in particular, based on a set of experiments in the lab setting, by the way, where they think that the more ideas you create, the better off you are. So we would like to suggest that there's more to it, right? So that the quantity does not translate into quality, and that something that we all agree upon is that novelty is a source of trouble, and is a source of or opportunities for leaders to be active in the innovation process. So that's the emphasis that I would like to make today. Make sense? Okay. So let me just give you an example what might a highly novel, a radical idea be in the West, that is. So let's say that you are a leader in an organization that is processing food, right? And you have this employee who keeps coming with ideas, and one day he has this brilliant idea. He said, let's produce food out of insects, right? So let's make food that is based on insects. It's a brilliant idea. People will love it. It's healthy, it's sustainable, it all fits, basically, right? So if you were the leader, what do you say to the person like that? What do you do? It's not a rhetorical question, actually. I would like you to answer. Anybody?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Go on, right? Okay, so when you and your colleague meet your boss that needs to sign the check, what does he say? No. Okay, why no?
There are a lot of skeptical people around us.
Yeah. So why are they skeptical? What might be the rationale?
Experience.
Okay, what kind of experience?
Tried it before.
And it didn't work?
Something novel which didn't work.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
But you can choose to let the insects eat vegetables, and a bird could eat the insect.
Yeah.
You could eat the bird.
Okay. So you're modifying the idea now, right? To make it. Why would that be then more acceptable?
Maybe if you're Chinese, you probably eat insects. But in our culture, we eat crayfish for the most. But we don't eat these kind of animals in the first place. So it's so far from our culture.
Right. So it is. It departs from what we consider as acceptable, right? Even though we are aware that in other parts of the world it is actually quite, well, relatively usual thing, or even a dessert in a way, right? I mean, we are barbarians of ourselves. I mean, we eat cows, right? Which is unacceptable for at least 1 billion of people plus. So what makes us accept or not accept certain novel ideas is absolutely contextual thing, right? And it's very interesting to observe also the work of our colleagues Spencer Harrison from Boston College and Samir Nur Mohammed from Wharton. They're actually studying an industry which is called entomophagy. I needed to check. It's an entomophagy industry that is actually trying to introduce a set of products in the domain of human nutrition in the West, right? So what they do, you can see. So they, for instance, they create a powder out of different insects, and then they bake, cookies out of it. So they change shape. Sometimes, so this is kind of a middle ground when you can still see the shape, but then it's. So they try to make it a bit more familiar to what we know, right? And a couple of other things. I don't want to go into let's say the marketing aspects of it, but it's an interesting just to see how crazy an idea might actually look like from the perspective where we stand, and how changing perspectives might make an idea absolutely less novel, right? So that's part of the story that I would like to address also in terms of the leadership capacity to deal with novel ideas, changing perspectives. So I hope that we agree by this point that it's an intriguing question, that it's an important one, that it can have very serious consequences, or it can have a incredibly high potential, right, for business and for sustainable development. So it's an idea to think about. And I'm really honored actually and delighted to be able to present a couple of ideas from a book that 42 people co-created. So we came up together with my colleagues Matej Černev from Ljubljana and Anders Disvik and Arne Carlsen here at BI with an idea that we should focus on a single question and then invite as many people as would be interested and we know to participate in this journey. So it took us about 2 years based on a lot of previous experience and with companies and collecting data to come up with what we have today. As mentioned, it's not only about the leadership capacity. It definitely is a multi-level thing to ask and to consider. Right, so we were dealing with certain individual level phenomena, intrapsychic thing, if you wish. A lot of it is about relational view, especially through the eyesight of a leader. We were considering teams. We were considering also organizational transformations, and there's even a couple of chapters about policy making for to implement highly creative ideas. So I'm going to share a couple of those. The underlying premise is actually that it's not a walk in the park, neither it is a piece of cake, and there is at least one reason for that. Ideas are not packages. Ideas are not isolated units. Ideas travel through organizations, and ideas are altered when they connect with people. Ideas also die if they don't connect with people, right? So you would, if you think about a little bit of the certain aspects of the what you can read in the popular press and also in the scientific one about innovation, it treats ideas as if they exist by itself, right? So it's isolated units, and that's actually I think we like to believe that this is a too narrow view on innovation. So this is the, in a way, the overview of the things that I would like to to bring forth, and also, to challenge you maybe to share your own examples and your own thoughts, so we can have some discussion in the end, time allowing, of course. 4 central ideas that I would like to suggest. One is that in order to capitalize on highly creative ideas, leaders need to be supportive or helpful. And by supportive and helpful, I absolutely do not mean or advocate for a type of leader that would, cover you with blanket when you're cold and all of that. But it is, as much it is, social emotional support, it is also about challenging. So it's both task and people oriented kind of behaviors that we think and understand as being supportive in the capacity of the leader. Second of all, it does not happen without people being proactive. So that's something that we know, long ago, that proactivity is tightly associated with innovation activity. The thing that was quite obvious in the literature when we started reviewing that was that a lot of explanations for proactivity came from this individual level. So we went and observed several organizations, and we keep doing that actually, to see what kind of practices, what kind of systems are there available for leaders to support this proactivity. So I'd like to share a couple of those examples as well. And I know that you have plenty more, so please don't hesitate to share. The third main message that I would like to make today is that it is a multiplayer game. And by multiplayer, I mean a variety of stakeholders, inner and external ones, right? With a differential, let's say, power to decide, with sometimes even opposing interest involved, with everyone actually a different set of eyeglasses to see this particular idea, right? So it involves multiple players. It's dynamic through the time, and it also involves dealing with variety of perspectives. So we have a chapter in the book that has studied design thinking in one of the early adopters, huge organization, and they've learned a couple of things that I would like to share with you on what actually works with dealing with in a way conflicting perspectives. So we call it sense making. You can call it mess, trouble, whatever, right? But it's what kind of tools are available and what to do in order to deal with that as a leader. And fourth, by far not last message, is about the idea journey as a change process. So I'd like to share a couple of insights and stories about the idea champions. I'd like to talk also a little bit about the underground types of idea championing, and again how to deal with that. Okay? So this is the first message about supportive leaders, and the previously mentioned actually study was also the study where we were showing what is it that perceived supervisor support does to highly creative ideas. So if you observe the upper yellow marked line, you will see that if employees were perceiving their leaders to be supportive, they would implement their ideas to the higher extent, regardless of the level of novelty. At the same time, the effect was the strongest on the highly creative ideas, highly novel ideas, right? So it's these radical ideas that actually need support of a leader the most. And just to give you a couple of examples, what do we mean by leaders being supportive? One, it is to, to provide them this task-oriented support, and the other is to relationship-oriented support. So very concretely speaking, helping somebody who was absent to catch up with what happened in the process, being there when workload increases, right? So because we should definitely be aware of the fact that if you're serious about selling the cricket idea into the big system, it's going to be very time consuming, it's going to be very resource demanding. So it's not something that you would do 20% on the top, right? I mean, even Google shied away from that after a couple of years, even though they had successful stories before, but they have redesigned the system. You cannot expect that would be, something extra. It's walking the talk that matters. And then also, a variety of things actually that you can do. But here it's actually three theories that are underlying this idea of perceptions of supportive leadership. And you will recognize that we speak about three connected but in a way different ways of how leaders can be supportive in implementing highly creative ideas. One is, of course, the resource allocation. One of the resources that it's actually very interesting is time. And what studies show is that it's not the excessive abundance of time that would work, and it's not even the time pressure that would work either. But it is some sort of optimum, let's call it, right? Right kind of time pressure or time slack that helps with ideas, right? And another, in a way, very important resource that a leader can provide is relational resource, right? So to connecting with people that can help, to connect with people that have knowledge, and to connect with people that have the decision-making authority. Those are, I would say, two pretty critical resources that leaders can provide in moving ideas like this one. Then it's the motivational aspect of it, and by motivation I mean both it's a long journey typically, and people become to idea champions become to saturated at certain point in time, and then you question when you face all these obstacles. So it's the stimulating the ideas that you can do it, right? The ideas of competence, and also that you're not alone, right? So being related to relevant others, it's what supportive leaders do. And then the third part is the part where the management innovations come in. So it's not so much actually about the tangible the value of this kind of innovation that have an effect, but it is their symbolic value that matters, right? So it's the message that everybody, even though they are not in the R&D team working exactly on that project with this kind of technical expertise, everybody can chip in, and that it's that it's something that we all appreciate and share. So it's this role modeling slash challenging role of leaders that also counts a lot. And here's one very interesting example. This is Mark O'Neill from Kelvingrove, the largest UK-based museum outside of London. They went through a very interesting journey. And this journey was actually a change from a organization that was, would be best described as bureaucracy, right? So a museum that was relatively traditional. So you have these departments of, Egypt and Rome and this and that, right? So it's a product-oriented kind of organization. And what they decided to do is to introduce process orientation, meaning they have been using the artifacts of the past to tell the stories of presence and future relevant to the local community. Right? So that's quite a change actually in the way, in the mindset. So the interesting part is how did he go about it, right? I would say that there are two very, very interesting leadership approaches that are indicative of what supportive leaders do. First, when he was asking for ideas in a bureaucracy, he used the language of bureaucracy. So they were filling forms to come up with creative ideas. Can you imagine? But that's the way to communicate in a system like that, right? So he didn't throw them all into a yellow submarine and right. Let's ideate, but it was actually something that was familiar to the group of people over there, the way they communicated, but the content was actually in the direction of desired change. And the second, I think, very interesting practice is what he calls maze behavior, right? So you actually, even though you're a leader, you don't know the way, right? So let's be frank and honest. If you would know the way, that it wouldn't be novel or radical or innovative. So you're just using this metaphor of a maze behavior to be very open to everybody that it is a trial and error process. So that we'll reach a wall and then we'll talk and we'll go back and try the other route. So that's how he was communicating to people in his museum what kind of leadership leads to what kind of to this kind of change. Right? So innovation happens also in museums. Second part, if there's a leader for that, of course, and a couple of other conditions. My second message today is the message about the leadership, in a way, systems that are conducive to proactive behaviors. And I would like to share with you also a couple of stories and a couple of examples from our book, and even a bit broader. But this is a kind of a theoretical framework, a model that we came up with by observing 3 automotive-based organizations in Slovenia, where I come from. And they are all part of some sort of value chains in a very different roles, right? So one company is employee-owned company, basically locally based, but they supply 60% of the European suction unit. So it's a vacuum cleaner motors, right? The other one is part of the multinational with, let's say, moderate levels of autonomy. And the third one is a Japanese-owned subsidiary that is I would say, would have the clearest structure in a way, so the lowest levels of autonomy. But they all based their work on innovation, regardless of the governance structures. So this is the first company, Domel, and they have, in addition to the majority market share in Europe, they have 15% global market share. I'm sure you never heard of them. That's the story of all the B2B, basically innovators, right? They are hidden somewhere under the packaged, product surface. So what they do, they supply, and they're actually developmental supplier to automotive, to home appliances, and also recently a lot of work in the hydrogen industry. It's a relatively, I would say, mid-sized organization. They are present in Slovenia and China, in US, when you talk to them, you really understand that it's very little romanticism about this innovation, right? So it's a slogan that they had: we plan for innovation, have all these goals. But what makes them interesting to me is the fact how they combine offline and online activities really to implement what they have set to do, right? So this is, every decent organization has some sort of ideation platform. It has existed way before we invented IT tools to do that, right? So sometimes they had boxes and they were throwing ideas in, but that is absolutely not enough. So all these initiatives, maybe after initial enthusiasm, they die off, right? So they have this curve. So what they do is they combine online and offline activities. They have twice a year, a month of innovation, where they create again this momentum, right, for people to understand why it is important and you know what is it that other people know. So it's creating energy around the whole process, and that's an iterative idea. You can't do that once and then forget about it. They dedicate people to it, so they have coordinators, which are in a way formalized idea champions. And they use extensively visual aids and also lean workshop methodology, which is maybe not surprising for a mature industry like manufacturing for automotives. That is another company from automotive industry. They are creating this. So it's the driveline technology. So that's this little part that is actually transmitting the power from the engine to the movement of the wheels, right? And they are part of the quite a big system. What they do very extensively is visual management. So feedback is based on pictures many times, right? So they go around, and in combination with management by walking around, so they have this policy that every square meter of the company needs to be examined at least twice a year, right? So they walk around a lot. They spend a lot of time also on a regular basis to check and to, in a way, to communicate every idea, also improvements, but also ideas, they need to be in a way visualized, and there's a requirement from the decision makers to be very quick in terms of providing feedback. So they have places all around the company where these are basically physical artifacts where this feedback happens. So the speed at which feedback is provided using visuals, those I would say are the two basically significant things about GECA and Driveline. They also have what I find interesting, this daily 20-minute meeting. It's pretty structured one, so they know that there will be 3 topics that they talk about. They will talk about the critical failures in other companies around the multinational. They talk about near misses, right? So also about learning before it happens. So in a way, they have a very neat and easy way of learning from mistakes or near mistakes across the whole system. Right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, nor do you have to spend 3 hours in order to talk about what really matters, right? In ideating, and so this is something that relates both to incremental and actually radical ideas. But yeah, so some of you might recognize that, I assume. This is at least recently announced initiative from Telenor Ignite. So where they have created a intrapreneurship platform. It was, as they told me, inspired by the positive experiences with accelerators in Asia within the system that were inviting ideas from others, correct? Yeah. So and also initial reactions are actually very good. So they thought that it will be a pilot, but they think about going a bit broader than that. And when we were talking to Mr. Ross, head of innovation over there, it was quite obvious that the buy-in from employees is a result of the fact that there are very concrete resources dedicated to it. And that it's not only about coming up with ideas, right? So it's actually, so they have a promise of 3 months paid time, secure job to come back. They have, of course, space that is co-located in a group of the external, actually, entrepreneurs. And I think another very important component is that they have teams. Right? So it's about the team. It's not about the individual. It's not about an idea. It's about the team that either makes it or breaks it. Right? So we will very eager to see how this will evolve. But another message that speaks, or another finding that speaks to what I initially said, was that it's actually rooted in the strategy, right? So this is the way how telecoms nowadays compete with internet providers for our attention, for the time that we spend on the online, right? And that requires a lot of different in-house and out of the house new products and services. Yeah. So I've been showing you several of the top-down approaches on how to stimulate employee productivity. I would like also to bring forth an activity that is more bottom-up in its nature. It's called job crafting. It has been developed by the University of Michigan, and they have used it also at Google for the group of people that don't get to, whose jobs are not necessarily so exciting as what we perceive them to be, right? And they also have a lot to chip in and a lot to contribute. So they have experimented with this job crafting activity, which is an activity where you invite your employees to, in a way, create their own jobs. And they can do it in 3 ways, right? So they can either add new activities, so horizontally, on the top of what you are already doing. Second extension possible would be a cognitive one. So this would be maybe something that a more senior person can come up with, and that you add the vertical levels, or more intellectually demanding actually tasks to your job. And also then the third component of the job crafting is the component where you basically connect with people that you think you should connect regardless of your formal setup and the people who you should report and talk to, right? So extending horizontally, extending vertically, and extending across the network of relationships. This is what job crafting is all about. And this is the study with our colleague Suti Wong from Department of Communication and Matej Černe previously mentioned. We were curious to see, is there an interplay, right, with this bottom-up activity? Is there something that leaders actually can do to support job crafting leading to certain outcomes? And we found that out of all the influence tactics that we know, leaders actually can help in building coalitions. So leaders can help most in these situations, in addition to giving freedom to design job that best fits the purpose, also by connecting. And this is actually what both third and fourth messages are all about. So the third message that I would like to make is a message about the multiplayer game and the multiple perspectives involved. This is also one of our contributors from University of Zagreb. He was comparing the design of jobs comparable to whether they are more on the front end of creativity process or they are more at the back end of the innovation process. And the main distinction was that the jobs that are designed to actually implement ideas are also much more interrelated with others. The tasks are much more interdependent, right? So their completion depends on the input and feedback from others, and they require much more of this collaboration and social support and involvement. So how do we do that? Design thinking is quite a hype nowadays. So I think it's for those of you that have a slight interest in it, I would encourage you to read the chapter that is written by Ingo Rauth. He is recently graduated from Chalmers in Göteborg, and our colleague Anja Svetina, who is at Stanford, working with IDEO, and in Ljubljana as well. So they were present and they were studying a multiple variety of design thinking workshops at a company with 100,000 employees. So it's one of the most, let's say, early adopters of this technique. And what they have learned is, well, they were observing several cases. One of the cases that I find very interesting is where the employees and other stakeholders were faced with the challenge to counterfeit the counterfeiting. So in other words, they were challenged to create something so frustrating for the copycats so that they wouldn't even think about copycatting their brands, right? So it's a big, hairy, and audacious goal to take on, and it was a process. It was involving many people, and of course, it's like in academia. I have 2 professors and 3 opinions. So there it was, 47 people or so, and then through the course of time, you name it, lots of different, even opposing and adversarial and conflicting opinions that they had. So I think what they learned, they identified the set of practices that worked. But I would like to emphasize 2 of those in particular. First, they said, if you are dealing with sense-making, if you are dealing with conflicts, take it one at a time, right? So if you want to eat an elephant, you need to slice it in small pieces, right? That's the logic. So it was working when they were taking one potential, it's in a way, conflict at a time. They were dealing with it, they engaged, and then they reconciled and acted upon it. So it was a set of many kind of feedback loops at the levels of pairs, teams, groups, back and forward, right? A really iterative process. Nothing linear about it at all. And then the second thing that was really crucial in order to implement such highly creative ideas was that the teams were not only diverse in our classical way of thinking, but they were crossing the levels of hierarchy, right? So that you actually involved people in the decision-making authority early on in the process, right? So it's not that you leave it to the foot soldiers to do the job and then beg for sponsor in the end, but it is actually involvement, of decision makers relatively early on. And that's something that is a bit departing, I would dare to say, from the business as usual, right? Then we were also studying a role of culturally diverse teams and what might help in these situations, dealing with highly creative ideas. So it's on the top of the novelty of an idea, you also have the variety of perspectives, cultures, languages that people come together with. And here is there are actually 2 streams of thinking when you think about diversity. One is that diversity breeds creativity. The other one is that diversity actually kills creativity, and because it's a source of all this coordination costs and trouble and all of that. And actually, what we found is that and what other colleagues have found before is that you need to have active leaders, you need to have a facilitated process, and then diversity will actually contribute to creativity, but not without that. You might be familiar with the concepts of cultural intelligence. This is the capacity of the organizational members in a diverse teams to understand, first of all, that they are aware of the differences. Right? So that's the metacognitive part, that they are aware of also how to do with it. So that's the cognitive part, that they are willing to do it, right? That's the motivational part, and also then it's the behavioral part, so that they actually do it. Okay. So when these 4 different dimensions of cultural intelligence were in place, so for the teams that were more culturally intelligent, they were significantly more able to utilize the potential of diverse perspectives. And that's something that can be trained, actually, by the way. It's not God-given or inborn skill that people have. Innovation also happens let's say, at the policy level. So here's an example from Peter Paricek and his team from Vienna. They were studying open government at the city of Vienna. Basically what the story is with them is that there is transparency, that is underlying involvement of all the relevant stakeholders in creating new public services, right? So they have decided for the really relatively high levels of transparency of the data that they possess. They made it available to researchers, to the journalists, to interested communities, to businesses, and they also created several of the platforms where you can meet. So they have next to the city hall, they have a Meta Lab, which is a co-working space. So this is where they communicate on a daily basis with IT developers to develop new services for the city, and that's just one of the forums, several groups. So basically, the story is yes, you facilitate by allowing access, but you also need to go a step further to organize the process if you'd like to really capitalize on many ideas that a community has, right? There is no better person to know what a citizen needs than a citizen herself or himself, right? And the fourth, let's say, message that I would like to get through today is that it's the message of idea champions. So ideas live or die when they connect to people, and the idea champions are the ones that in a way are interested or passionate about those ideas. Idea champions come from all sorts of places, sometimes really unusual places as well, and not everything that they do is completely according to the SOP, right? So here are, but what they are really passionate about, what they burn for, is that they try to overcome all the barriers that an idea is facing, especially the radical idea is facing. So here is a couple of examples, right? So the officially, let's say, named idea champions would be change agents, project managers or sponsors. So they take care that idea would be communicated well, that it would have the legitimacy that it needs to have, right? So walk the idea as they are part of the formal requirements. But the interesting part is actually those three groups called, I think, in a very colorful names, such as creative smugglers or stealth innovators, right? So these are the people, for instance, the creative bootleggers. They take the initiative to work on ideas with no formal support, and they do it in order to benefit the organization, right? One of the well-known stories is this Post-it, right? 3M story of how the Post-it was actually moved through the system. But I would like to share with you a couple more fresh ones. Corporate smugglers are the people that actually involve, create, and so on, but they actually also experiment, and they understand that you can't push an idea onto others. You need to, in a way, involve and extend the sense of ownership. Stealth innovators, I'll show you an example of one, are those that actually intentionally take an idea under the radar up until the point where it's relatively ready. So this is Jordan Cohen at Pfizer. He came up with an idea that instead of outsourcing jobs, they could outsource tasks. So the level of the, let's say, educational level of his group of coworkers was very high, and they were doing jobs that were actually, in a way, boring or where their capacities were underutilized, so to say, right? So plus that, a lot of time pressure on the top of it. So what they decided to do, they introduced a button on the Outlook where they would be, with one touch, they would be able to outsource, preparation of slides, analysis of an Excel file, things like that, to a trusted partner that they would do these jobs for them. They are also able to negotiate the deal up front, right? So they were able to see, system-wise what this kind of task means, and they were able to compare, can I do it not only better, can I do it cheaper, right? All of that. So it's a transparency, ease of use, and in a way, very interesting organization and innovation. He's interesting, Jordan Cohen is an interesting person because the way he has done it. So he has waited quite a lot of time, went through a couple of iterations, involved other peoples into the ownership, and then after that he went up and got support and even the formal role. And we are approaching actually the end, but I would just like to say that 20% time off does not work, in case you missed this latest news from Google, because I saw that a lot of organizations are still relying on the fact that if you announce that you have 1 day off and you don't do anything actually about the level of requirements, that innovation will dramatically improve, and that's not the case, I'm sorry. So this is what actually works, is to create a sense of psychological safety. That's what Amy Edmondson has been studying. That's what we like to train our students also with online simulations and so on. And that's what they have also studied again at Google as a #1 characteristics of innovative teams. So psychological safety, to come up with crazy ideas and to rely on your network that they would say, at least that they would consider it without killing your will to come up with an idea again. So let me show you one more clip for the end, and it is a story about idea championing.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not 2 nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Thank you very much. Just to wrap up one more minute, I would like, what does it take? What did we learn actually about succeeding with capitalizing on creativity to deal with these trolls of innovation paradox and more? Sometimes it's a touch of magic. Many times it's a lot of hard work. But fortunately, there's also some, meta knowledge on how to do it. So to me, it's always amusing to read some of the exchanges that Thomas Alva Edison and Nikola Tesla had. Yeah. Thank you all very much. Hope you got something that you can take away, and please don't hesitate to contact any of us if you have ideas on how to know more and better on how to capitalize on creativity.